Welcome to A Healthy Bite. You're one nibble closer to a more satisfying way of life, a healthier you, and bite-sized bits of healthy motivation. Now let's dig in on the dish with Rebecca Huff.
Hi, I'm Rebecca, and today I am here with authors of a cookbook that has been long overdue on the shelf. It's called The Anti-Cookbook, and it is by Rebecca Bloom and Shelley. Can you pronounce your last name for me, Shelley?
Onderdonk.
Onderdonk. Okay. And I was just telling them before we started recording, this is the best book. I really think it's time that someone wrote this book because so many of us moms do this. We anti-cook. We know how we do it. And it's kind of like your kids always say, "Hey, Mom, can you tell me how to make that?" And one of you guys even had this happen, and that was the Asian sauce recipe in here?
Yeah.
Anti-recipe, unrecipe. So that was you?
Yes. Well, it was our joint. We actually devised that sauce when we were living together in college. Rebecca and I.
Oh my goodness. That is the coolest thing. Well, Shelley, why don't you start and tell us a little bit about yourself, and then Rebecca, you can tell us about yourself, and then we'll jump into talking about some of your unrecipes.
Hi, I am Shelley Onderdonk, and I am by profession a veterinarian, but I am also a mother of 3 sons, part-time writer, part-time yoga teacher, and rider and trainer of horses as well. I live in Aiken, South Carolina on a horse farm and have raised the boys here with hopefully the ideals of taking care of our earth. And my partner is Rebecca.
I love it.
Hello. Thanks, Shell. My name is Rebecca Bloom. I am a former attorney. I'm a writer and an editor. I work for a startup as an editorial director presently. I have 2 daughters, and Shelley and I met in college. We can talk more about that afterwards. But I've got the 2 daughters. She's got the 2 sons, and raised them with a real appreciation for healthy and organically grown foods, and realized when the first one got out the door out of college that she needed a real love letter about how to actually do all this stuff that I'd been raising her to do. And enter Shelley's email.
So yes, I had the idea the same summer that Rebecca's talking about, because our oldest children are the same age. They both graduated from college, were by happenstance both moving to New York City to start work. And I found myself answering a lot of queries about, old recipes. Mom, how do I do this? And feeling a big responsibility to try to transmit some of the information, because healthy eating is very important to me. I've been a long time, mostly vegetarian, and did a lot of cooking for my sons. Because we live on a farm, fast food is not available. So we cooked. And my worst nightmare was to think about my child moving to New York City and eating out every single meal. And not only because it would be too expensive, but also it'd be so unhealthy. And so I started writing down some of the ideas that I had. And as I was writing, I realized that there were just a lot more than just the recipes that I wanted to talk to about, and a lot more than just food, like what you put in your mouth, but sort of the larger issues around food that I kind of wanted to impart to my child. And as I was writing, I had an epiphany that Rebecca was the person that I wanted to pursue this project with. Rebecca, I had worked with Rebecca once before when my husband and I had written a book, and she was our editor. And so I knew from a writing perspective and working with her that would be a very good relationship. And then from my more personal interaction with her, and knowing that she shared a lot of my same values, I thought that she would have a lot to add to my seed of an idea.
Sure. I was literally walking down Broadway from Bed Bath & Beyond with plastic bags cutting into my arms. You know how they do that?
Yeah.
We shouldn't use those bags anymore. But in any case, they were cutting into my arms. I was moving my daughter in with my parents because she didn't have a job yet in New York. So she was staying with my mom and dad. And my mom and dad eat out a lot. And what I told my kid is, if you're going to live with them, you're going to cook for them. So it was incredible. I was buying pots and pans and blenders and spatulas and bringing them into the apartment when I got this email from Shelley. So I knew that saying yes was absolutely the directive. So I went with it.
It's like it was meant to be.
Yep.
You know, when you have that feeling like, oh my, I can't believe this is falling in my lap right now of all times. I absolutely love it when that happens. But I did read your story about, you know, how you had moved your daughter in. And that was one of the first things I was just so impressed by, that she was moving in with your parents and that you were like, okay, well, you're going to cook for your grandparents. I mean, first of all, the fact that you could ask her to do that and, you know, that she would have any idea how to cook anything, that was impressive in and of itself. And then the fact that she would be willing to go along with that. I mean, just the whole idea of it, I thought was wonderful. I mean, you know, you don't get a free ride very often in life. So having her take on that responsibility was probably a huge benefit for your parents and her. So how did it turn out?
Well, it turned out great. But at the beginning was the flood of text messages that led to an entire chapter of the book. Which, you know, if you read the book, you know what I'm talking about. It was really wonderful because, you know, my parents were nurturing her, welcoming her to this big new city while she was in a stressful moment looking for the right job. And in turn, she nurtured them. So I was so happy to jump in and do a little bit of coaching to get her there. And it was really lovely because she learned how to experiment and she learned how to do things on the fly, and she figured out how to shop, how to prepare, how to save things for lunches and leftovers and what you can freeze and how to deal with a slow cooker. You know, so many things. She learned how to organize life, not just for herself, but to benefit my parents in the moment. And boy, they were so sad when she moved out.
I bet. That's beautiful. I loved that. I love that story. So Shelley, when you came up with this seed of an idea, as you call it, did you know it was going to be the anti-cookbook, or did you think, okay, I'm going to write this cookbook, I'm going to try to help people, or did you know that it wasn't going to be like a recipe, step 1, step 2, step 3? And also, would you explain to our listeners who maybe haven't picked up a copy of this book why you call it this, and a little bit about how the cookbook is structured?
Okay. Yes. So it was definitely going to be a different kind of cookbook from the very beginning, because part of what we really want to convey is that you do not have to have a perfect picture of a meal in order to eat well. And we also we're very conscious of cost in all of the recipes, and in sort of the ethos of the book. And so that is also was there from the very beginning. And so we came up with the idea of the anti-cookbook from a coloring book that you maybe have heard of before, but I was a huge fan of the anti-coloring book series for my kids. It is basically a coloring book that does not ask you to color within the lines and asks you to think outside the box. And so a typical page, like I remember this page that my middle son did, was, you know, giving you a general description of something that you might want to create to make somebody healthier. Like, you know, like just really innovative kinds of things. And some of it was, yes, more simple, and that was a complicated one, but like, and that maybe not be a great example. But anyways, the anti-coloring book was basically about not being your typical coloring book. And so I wanted this to be not your typical cookbook where you have to spend, you know, $200 when you go to the grocery store and 6 hours in order to make a meal for 4 people, you know, that was not going to be everybody's way that they want to spend an afternoon. And we, as far as the actual title, we did go round and around about it, as you know, people always do who write books. For a while, the anti part of it was just going to be a chapter, and we had some other, you know, we had obviously a lot of other ideas for the title, but we ended up circling back and coming back to our original sort of intention, I would say. What do you think about that, Rebecca, as far as picking the title?
Yes, I agree. And we did go around a lot, and we have almost no conflict, but this was something we had a little bit of back and forth, the gentlest of creative pushback on. And what we ended up with,
everybody else's ideas too, because
yes,
everybody was, you know, you think about a title, everybody wants to give their opinion, including
exactly.
spouses and children, the people you hire. Anyways, go ahead.
Yes. Anyway, so when you see something called the anti-anything, it has a bit of a negative connotation. And so that's something that really gave some of our early reviewers and supporters a bit of pause. Well, how are you going to write a cookbook that says you're against cooking? You know, if you just look at it like that, who's going to pick that up off the shelf? It says the anti-cookbook. What does that mean?
Your explanation about why you aren't saying you don't love cookbooks.
Exactly. And so, you know, we aren't against cooking. That's not the point. Mm-hmm. The point is we're against this complex of factors that causes people to feel intimidated by the process of shopping or growing and preparing healthy, nourishing food for themselves and their families. We're against ordering a meal kit with all that packaging. We're against fast food. We're against doing the easy, quick thing to shove some food down your throat. And we're for sitting down to a meal with people you care about and taking the time regardless of how busy you are. We're against really exhaustive recipes that make people feel like they can't possibly replicate what that chef made. And what we're for is practical, affordable solutions to healthy, organic eating. So there you have it.
That, I think you pretty much summed it up. I mean, that's basically kind of my thought process as I read through the book of this is why you wrote the book, probably part of why you didn't include a lot of pictures. I mean, that's one thing that I will preface that by saying that I am obsessed with cookbooks. But when I first moved out of my parents' home as a young person, I had no idea how to cook anything beyond maybe cinnamon toast and scrambled eggs. And maybe I knew how to make gravy. I'm not sure because I'm from the South. I might have known how to make fudge because that was something that my dad always did in an iron skillet, you know, so like a couple of things, but not enough to survive really. And so I had to learn, and I went out and I got that first red and white cookbook that, you know, everybody gets. And I basically taught myself, but this would have been so much better because there's not the exactness of, for example, you have here is brown rice with sauteed greens topped with a fried egg. And you talk about how to add a nutritional boost to it, how to add a spice boost. And then, of course, my favorite, it's that Asian sauce. What's that one called?
Pong pong.
Pong pong sauce.
I knew it had a funny name, and I made it because I have made variations of pong pong sauce, and I love, you know, Asian flavors, and I loved the pong pong sauce. And so I think this is the kind of cookbook that people can really start out with and work their way up to. If, like you say, you're not against cookbooks, there's no reason why people can't move up to those fancier cookbooks where, hey, when you finish, it should look something like this, right?
Yep.
Right.
It's exactly. Like a starter for kids moving out or for adults who've maybe never cooked before, just getting an idea of how to get in the kitchen and actually prepare a meal that you can eat, not trying to make some kind of showstopper meal.
Yeah, it is definitely meant to be feeding your family well, or feeding yourself well on a weekday when you're busy. but you don't want to do takeout, and so how you can kind of manage that. And one of my particularly favorite chapters is The Week at a Time, where we really talk about how to think about shopping, like on a Sunday, preparing some basic things, take you just a couple hours, and can kind of really see through most of the week. And that's a lot of involving riffing on a theme. So you kind of get some basic things down, and then you can add different things on different nights, so you're not feeling like you're just repeating leftovers all the time.
And building on the previous days and stuff like that. I thought that was genius, the way you shared that. I wanted to ask you guys, so as you were writing the cookbook, did you guys collaborate together? Like, a lot of this stuff probably started from when you were in college. So tell me kind of the process of how you guys came up with the various recipes or unrecipes. I'm feeling strange calling them recipes because they're more like food guides.
Food ideas.
Food ideas, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I guess I'll start with that. Is that our first, how we work basically was every 2 weeks we gave each other assignments. And then we would meet by talking and go over what we'd worked on and found. But the first couple were just all coming up with recipes. And so probably for the first 2 months or something, what we would do is we would try to remember a recipe and write a story about the recipe. So they were like story food, And after we had sort of a group of those was when we started organizing it a little bit more. And then we probably spent about 6 months organizing it. And then we came back in and added more recipes too, because, we've been able to ferment for a while and come up with more ideas. And then for a while, it was kind of fun because whenever I would cook, I would kind of be creative a little bit and think about, well, what can I do that's new, and I was ostensibly working.
Yeah. What I would add to that is we know each other well. And what we decided to do was mine one another's backgrounds and experiences. So we come from pretty different backgrounds. I grew up in New York. Shelley grew up in California. Now I live in California. She lives in South Carolina. I lived for a while in Italy. She lived for a while in China. So we each picked up on some really interesting food influences along the way and learned things from people as we went. So we really tried to put those together. And that's why it came out so interesting and diverse. And we were so excited about that. And also the other thing I wanted to point out, what Shelley said is really right. The stories of the food really matter to us because it's about connecting with our forebears and connecting our kids to our grandparents. And it's just so lovely and meaningful. And we really wanted to make sure we captured that.
I love that. And I think you did. I think it was very much a book about breaking bread. It's just about family and togetherness. And it's so much more focus on, people, and just the togetherness of how food brings us together and a little bit less on execution. So I guess that's kind of my take on it.
That's a great take.
Well, thank you. My daughter looked at it and she's 11, by the way. And so she says, I can cook anything as long as I have a recipe. So far, that's been true. I don't really feel like I ever taught her to cook, but somehow she, I guess through osmosis of being in the kitchen with me or being my helper, she's picked up on stuff. But this is what blows my mind is, so she says, I'm going to make macarons one day. And I was thinking, oh gosh, this is going to be a disaster because egg whites, stiff peaks, all these things, I'm thinking this is going to just be, and I was like, okay, honey, just want to let you know, those are really hard. Macy, her older sister, Macy's made those before. And she said that they're pretty difficult. And Shauna's like, well, I think I can do it. And so I'm like, okay, help yourself. So she went in the kitchen. I heard a lot of noise in there. A couple of hours later, I went in and she had these perfectly uniform with the feet. I don't know if you have ever tried to cook macarons, but there's a specific way you have to do the egg whites, and then they end up with these little feet on them. And so somehow she had managed to crank out several dozen perfect macarons with a recipe. And I was beyond blown away. So like I'd never had made macarons myself. And so I was just kind of shocked. But when she saw this book, she was like, well, it doesn't have an ingredient list really. I mean, it's not, where are the steps? And I was like, no, this cookbook, it lets you be in charge. So you can take it and just make something with it. You know, it's a guide. And so she's like, oh, I get it. But you probably can't do that with baking, right? And I was like, well, baking is a little bit more exact.
Well, with
Baking is a little more,
so you can. Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean,
Baking is a little more precise.
You have
But
to be precise. You have to know what you're doing a little bit. It's a little less forgiving, but you still, I mean, my muffin recipe is a perfect example in there where, you know, it's really open and like try lots of different things because a lot of different things work. Muffins are a good thing to do it with because they're pretty forgiving.
Muffins. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
you know, something you made me think of when you told that story, Rebecca, about your daughter making the macarons, which, wow, I'm impressed because those are hard to make, is one of our original titles, our working title that we started with was Cooking Your Way to Independence. And so this idea that she saw this challenge and decided to just put her head down and conquer it is really in line with what we're doing, even if the specific precision of a macaron recipe isn't what we're after, but that journey is definitely what we were after.
Exactly. And I guess that journey that you have translated into this book is the journey that she went on with me, because I feel like what you do here is what most of us who we give that to our kids. I mean, so some people cook a lot and some people don't. People like me who love to cook and spend all their time in the kitchen, somehow our kids get this cookbook just because we're there and they learn this process from us in a way. And so I think because she was not intimidated by the whole process of cooking, because I had kind of done this same thing that you're doing for people with her, she was more confident and she was like, well, I have the recipe, I can cook it. So she wasn't afraid to try. And I think that's what you're doing with this book, is you're giving people the confidence to actually go in the kitchen and know that I can go in here and when I'm done, there's going to be something, a result that I can actually eat. I don't have to be perfect. I don't have to measure everything exactly. I can go in there and when I come out, I'm going to have food.
Yeah.
So I think it's just a process.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And, you know, as much as we aren't all about the Instagramming of food because of the intimidation factor and the artificial need for perfection, I will say that one of the most gratifying things is when readers proudly send us Snapchats or photos of what they made and say, thanks, ACB, or you know, they describe what they did and how they did it, or how they riffed on one of our recipes to do it. And it's such a joy when that happens.
And you know, in all fairness, we do have photos on our website and we do post photos on Instagram. We just wanted to make the book black and white because we wanted, first of all, we like the simplicity of it aesthetically. And then also we just wanted to keep it affordable for people to purchase.
Right. That's what I was going to mention, is that your Instagram, there are pictures of food on there. And I didn't see a hashtag. Do you guys have a specific hashtag that you use for your food?
We do hashtag anti-cookbook, and then we have a whole host of other hashtags that we jump on depending on what we made and what it is. Yes.
So when you were preparing the recipes, were you sending each other pictures back and forth?
Sometimes.
Yes. Yeah. Rebecca is our social media person, so I send her the pictures when I take them. Yeah. If I'm experimenting, I send her the pictures.
Okay. All right. Well, I wondered because I was like, well, so when you did this, obviously, if one of you guys were working on a recipe, then you kind of share it with the other person, just test it out and see, you know, compare notes then.
I sort of did a Julie and Julia thing with every one of Shelley's recipes because I've made all my own, obviously. And so, yes, I have sent her many photos of things that she put in the book. Like her curry is probably my favorite thing. If you haven't tried that one, it's so simple. Your whole house smells amazing. It's a great thing to serve. And it lasts a long time too. A small bit of it can feed a lot of people.
I'll put that on my list to try. I actually have a cookbook club, and we move through these various cookbooks and stuff. And I think this one would be really good, because that's what happens a lot of times is I will pick something, because I love cooking and I'm obsessed with cookbooks. I will pick something big and fancy, and then I'm like, oh, I love this cookbook. And everyone else is like, no. So I think something more simple from time to time. It's got to be a balance. You've got to get something there that everyone will, be able to partake in. So, but I love the idea, and I felt like I could relate to it so much as my adult children have left home, and I've received those same messages like you guys talk about in the book, when your kids would message you and say, Mom, how did you make that? Such and such. And then you would be like, okay, I've got to explain this to them. And I've went through that so many times with my kids. And I just think it's maybe a universal mom feeling, or, you want to make sure they're eating. And I'm the same as you. I don't want my kids to be eating out all the time, but there's only so much you can do when they grow up and leave home. But I think this would be a wonderful graduation gift. When kids graduate from high school and they're heading out to college, this would be an excellent graduation gift.
Well, thanks for that endorsement. We've actually had a couple of graduation parties where we've been featured as a great graduation gift. And we definitely think, college graduation too. But, one of the things we say is it's great for anyone starting out. It's also great for anyone starting over. My sister recently moved to a new state, and she said, this was so great as a shot in the arm for me to just kind of get a whole new slate of basics. So it was good for that too.
So do you have plans to do another cookbook anywhere in the near future? I mean, you're an editor, so...
Well, now that your daughter's interested in more complex recipes, it makes me wonder if we don't have some graduates who'd be ready for parts two. What do you think?
That's what I'm
Sally?
thinking.
Yeah.
Whatever the next phase is, I'm thinking maybe there's another cookbook in there, or another anti-cookbook, or it could be the some kind of a segue into cookbooks. You'll have to think of a clever title for the next cookbook after anti-cookbook.
Yes.
We'll get working on it.
Good. I just love putting one more thing on other people's plates.
Thanks for that.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Rebecca, for having us. We really appreciate the support and the interest.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. Please rate and review so other people can learn about this podcast. Find out more about sleep, hygiene, eating healthy, tasty recipes, zero-waste lifestyle, and lots more on ThatOrganicMom.com. Help us spread the word. Be blessed and stay healthy.